Out of every franchise that has ever existed for Disney, Toy Story remains to be the one that manages to keep on kicking, continuing on throughout the decades after it brought Pixar into the mainstream almost 30 years ago and forever changing the landscape of animation. It's the only major animated franchise that has managed to continue producing quality films after the others surrounded in Disney could never actually match their predecessors in quality despite some issues surrounding their most recent iterations. Because out of every other Disney animated film franchise, Toy Story sequels are the only ones I could ever truly enjoy that was designed with well fleshed out characters and stories to watch from the second film to the fourth regardless of their problems. But the one I personally enjoyed the most out of all of them relies smack dab in the middle, being Toy Story 3, serving as the true perfect conclusion to Andy and his toys, sending them off in their own ways for the future to come. It represents the amount of growth and change that Pixar had gone through from that point, from Toy Story and the numerous amounts of original works that were praised by everyone who watched it. A movie that really grew with its audience and understood it was time to move on towards the next stage in life, whether it be our own or the studio's own future without it, as it actually did close off the golden age of Pixar, leaving one that unfortunately started with the new films like Cars 2 in an era of mediocre sequels. But at the very least with this film, it brought perfect closure to a great story that was well rounded with a trilogy that birthed 3D animation. And with that, I just wanted to share elements that made it a great film that will be fondly remembered for newer generations to come, in keeping with the ideas of the story. And one of the greatest things about Toy Story films is their ability to stand on their own. Each individual film has a certain distinct identity and style that continues the story, but is also able to be watched as a single experience without losing much of what is already known and the element that is found at the very beginning. Because in the beginning of these films, they start with a certain scene where the toys are actually play acting alongside Andy's imagination. The first one is just Andy narrating his imagination in that part, the second one is actually Rex playing with the Buzz Lightyear video game, and the third one rounds it all off well by actually having it take place in Andy's imagination itself, immersing ourselves in the world that he created and creating something that is unexpected. Because we all know Toy Story does take place in the real world where toys actually do come to life after we leave school or whatever, where making the scene take place in his imagination sets up a really powerful statement about where the characters are actually headed, what might be their last time we really get to see them played with when it transitions back into Andy playing again, making memories to the beat of You Got a Friend in Me, representing those fond years we actually spent with him. And that is something I really loved the first time I actually watched the film in theaters. It knows what it wants to harken back to what we loved about the first two Toy Story films, and actually growing up with Andy and the wonders that we experienced as a kid recorded by his mom and the memories we watch on our old cameras. Because then we realized this puts us back into the modern times where the toys are desperately trying to call Andy as their last attempt to actually play with them again, realizing that he is 17 years old and actually off to college at this point. And when you hit that age, you really do stop caring about the toys you played with, as you are now grown up in the world as a young adult. And this is something I've come to know as that is what actually happened to me with my own toys actually sitting at storage at this very point, where the scene just really becomes so relatable to us. A sad reality that does happen to toys, whereas discussed in Toy Story 2, everything they said actually came to fruition. And it's where Woody actually has to rally everyone to stick together, as it is the end of the world where the purpose has already been fulfilled for Andy, trying to stick in the attic now to the hopes of everyone, where some actually decide to move on while others cannot actually let go. The dilemma our main characters have to face when Andy truly decides to take Woody with him and send Buzz and the rest to the attic after his mother actually misunderstands his trash bags as trash, truly believing their lives are at the very end. It sets up this interesting argument and dynamic for our characters like Jesse, who had already experienced such abandonment by Emily in the past, and trying to realize life's cruel cycle, one that actually shows that kids eventually forget about them and what they were designed to do. Their relationship they formed actually meant nothing, just now tossed out into the garbage now, which we all know through the course of the series itself isn't true, with Woody finding a greater purpose to what a toy brings to a child in our most formative years. And Woody is the only one who actually sticks by them to try to make them believe, the eternal optimist hoping for something better than what was brought throughout the years, where all of them just now want to get set off into a new world of daycare, which Woody has to convince otherwise, that they're set in stone, that Andy has forgotten about them, grown up, and they have to move on without him. It's the polar opposite from Toy Story 2, where Woody actually believed he'd be better off behind a glass panel where kids from Japan would actually look at him eternally, where Buzz actually had to go on this arc that he grew from for the first by sticking by Andy and the meaning of being a toy, where he once again grew as a leader in this film to be on the other side of the fence once again. A back and forth dynamic and development that actually works in this case, as it does grow throughout the period that we go through growing up. This then introduces us to the world of Sunnyside, where it all seems happy, where kids play with toys all day long and it never stops, like a never-ending train of kids to actually be played with and be appreciated, ruled by a lovable strawberry-smelling bear called Lotso, presented as this nice grandfather figure who helps new toys find purpose after their owners grow up and abandon them as a result, which convinces everyone, including Buzz in this situation, to believe in this world. And I guess the driving force for Buzz being like this in this film is just how Andy chose Woody over him, so he thought his time was personally finished by how they were in the trash bag, where he seemed fit to actually accept this new reality for them, even if he is the most level-headed out of all of them, being Woody's closest friend, where he stuck throughout all those years with a friendship that truly never dies. But the best part of Sunnyside is the introduction of other groovy characters like Ken, voiced by Michael Keaton, trying to set the stage that all toys we've come to know are actually welcomed here, any type that you can imagine, where they enter the younger Caterpillar realm with the potential for toys to actually be played with like they never experienced before. But Woody, knowing the truth that he had done for the past few films, always seemed dead set in his way to go back and try to convince them that Andy does care about them. But unfortunately in this case, like everyone else, they seem willing to actually move on after the heartbreak they experienced in the last few years, opting to stay while he goes. A common thing throughout where most people actually did distrust Woody, and rightfully so for some of his beliefs, but still remained steadfast and believe in them regardless, which makes him one of the best characters ever created, never giving up until his last breath, which he tries to do so, but then gets caught up meeting Bonnie for the first time, and introducing us to the newer generation of kids who love toys when he gets sent back to her house. A point that I hate because Toy Story 4 would soon butcher this badly, but at least shown here for Woody to actually accept that there's more that he could give by moving on from Andy in a child that actually seemingly loves him so much, hanging out with their other toys to know the truth of Sunnyside and Lotso due to Truckle's own past. This is the moment where we find ourselves that Lotso is in fact evil, where when we see him switch back to how the toys get mistreated by the toddlers in the Caterpillar room is how Lotso actually rules the daycare with an iron fist, letting people in who he likes himself personally to get to his side to get all the love and affection, while others just get trashed just because, making Buzz his own puppet in the process and rounding up the rest of the gang in a mock jail to serve his own will. And just like the other great Toy Story villains, this actually comes from the place of neglect, being loved at first by his owner and Daisy and Big Baby and Chuckles, but then left abandoned because their parents were absolute dumbasses, leaving stuff that they owned behind, forcing them to trek back along before he sees another Lotso doll in her care because of that, where due to a toy's view of the world being so small and so limited to certain areas, he really took that to heart as she herself actually replaced him, or more specifically in this case just Lotso, as we only see the new one in this scene here. That he was the center of her very world, and his in this case, and only saw it as that, and jumped and rushed to conclusions that made him bitter, that if he can't be loved, then no one else can regardless, being replaced and nothing more, finding the daycare where he really turned it into his own personal domain, rigging the system designed for everyone by making that of a pick and choose to satisfy his own viewpoints about the world. He really never looked beyond what he had himself and betrayed his closest friends compared to that of Woody, who really cared about sticking beside everyone, deciding to actually help and break them out to actually save them. This is the point where they really realized that Woody was actually telling the truth the whole time, apologizing for their actions, willing to go home, where he does have a plan to get them one way out. This is actually one of the best parts of Toy Story, where it becomes a secret heist mission where they all work together to actually escape to get home. Something the other films of course don't have, with the unique setting of a daycare, which kind of represents the last step in the toy's journey in this place after an owner grows up in this case, expanding the world in a unique paradise by day, but also a cold prison by night. And I really love how they have other characters and toys like Potato transform into different forms with his body, and then of course switching Buzz into Reset to Spanish mode, adding more to the actual characters and what comes from the toys no matter what types that actually comes with them. A film that actually combines the right comedic elements to actually churn them all together in the perfect finale. And as we see, this plan actually seems successful when they actually travel down, but then we realize that Lotso seemed to actually caught onto them, wanting to throw them all the way, to try to end this parade right here and then, and continue his powerful reign. But knowing what Woody knows and what Ken actually realized in the error of his ways, in how Lotso's putting himself up in a tyrannical dictatorship, we start to see the cracks forming and the egos start growing. How he actually kept this lie up, believing that she replaced them, not actually caring about Big Baby's feelings as he tries to remove that point from his life as his own servant, that nothing is more important than serving his own selfish desires, where any thought of a loving owner turns him into a selfish vile maniac bent on trying to prove himself right, and the useless life of toys waiting to be thrown away at the end, where it also results in his own demise because of what he had done to them, but manages to hold Woody down and drags them back to the trash truck to be dumped in this landfall. The most interesting thing about Toy Story 3 in its own ideas is how it does solidify itself as a conclusive story, going straight to this landfill where things actually get discarded forever, incinerated, never to be seen again, which really sets itself up as the true end of a toy's life in this instance. After we went on this journey with Andy and his toys, it sets up this question of where the toys would actually end up, maybe ending up with a new owner, a daycare filled with kids, or straight to the death pit itself, rushing against the clock to try to save their own lives and restore what they had in time for Andy. One where they actually also save Lotso in this process because they do believe that toys deserve second chances. They are not heartless because they actually stick together. But then of course, time and time again, Lotso does prove how much he's in it for himself, never caring about anyone else despite himself. That despite helping him in their best efforts to stick together to actually save themselves for one another, he never seeks to actually learn or grow from anybody but his own selfish desires, thinking he deserves everything for his life as it all revolves around him, when in reality, he truly does have nothing else to offer as seen later. Because the toys themselves truly want to stick together as they are a family, always being there for each other no matter what, and are able to accept the inevitable end. Probably one of the most saddest moments in all of Pixar, where your most beloved characters you stuck by for so many years were going to end this way. We knew it was going to end, but we didn't actually expect it to be like this. Even if we knew that they were going to escape regardless, you couldn't just help but feel bad for them, like they could actually be ended in this very moment. The one that tries to conclude itself as a story until they actually get saved by the claw by the three green men, really referencing the crane game all those years ago from the first film. And of course, that sets everyone off for relief, so they live another day, but also leave Lotso to his own devices, knowing it's not worth it for vengeance, or it already has come to his own way in the form of karma. Really lost in this landfill, trekking back, and then found by the trash guys stuck in the center finally, but for the wrong reasons. And as a result, he finally gets the attention he wanted, but the wrong kind of attention. This time, no longer being adored, instead sticking out of a garbage truck nobody actually cares about anymore, as they stink and rot forever. And then we see our gang finally manage to find their way back home in time to be put in the attic, and Woody actually going off with Andy to college, saying what could be their last goodbyes until the next film, of course. And this is where things start to get emotional for the last few moments of the film, where Andy's mom gets filled with that emotion, knowing her son is growing up, moving on in his life, while Woody makes the note to encourage him to donate these toys, ones who could actually be taken care of when he personally found, like Bonnie, traveling down there and giving the best part of the entire Toy Story film. This could be seen in so many ways for us who move on in life, because when we see him give each of the toys to her, he really gives out this passionate speech describing what they actually are, like he had as a child, showing really how much he actually cared for them and never actually neglected them whatsoever. That you just know he grew up and actually has to move on in his life, knowing that this girl could have the potential to carry that legacy he had as a child. It's a scene that truly gets the best out of you, knowing that they really do mean a lot to them over the years, and of course to us by that extent, trying to actually take care of them, while also revealing that Woody snuck himself in at the last second. It's a moment that really shocks him because he really did want to take him to college as a memory of his childhood, but pauses long enough to really think about it. Think about what we went through since Toy Story and what he really meant to him from the very first title card. It's unexpected from someone like Woody who really loves Andy so much, but from what we came to understand in others like Bonnie and his relationship with other toys, sticking by them through and through, it really seemed like the best type of choice. The part where everyone eventually cries because, like Andy says, he'll never actually give up on you and will be there no matter what. A special part of Andy who accepts him that he must move on and let others the opportunity to experience what he had in life and the mission that Woody actually found himself set out to do. It's not about one toy like Lotso, and of course to an extent Woody himself in the first film to be played with, but more for the love of a child that has time to develop, to mature into a passionate, kind-hearted person, really setting themselves off in the world, sending him off to Bonnie to become a promise that she would do the same thing that he did, and accept it as is. And like the start of the film, it finally closes things off one last time for the toys, finally getting to be played with by none other than Andy himself, and also managing to begin things anew with Bonnie in that very process, concluded with his gratitude that he had while playing them, saying so long partner. In its basic essence, Toy Story 3 is a perfect conclusion to a franchise that began it all, moving from one generation to the next, and of course capping off the golden age of Pixar animation by itself. It's one that will always be fondly remembered for managing to continue the story as a perfect sequel, and as a perfect conclusion even when Disney keeps beating the franchise into a pulp at this point. But regardless of my feelings of the present day Toy Story, it remains to be universally enjoyed by everyone for what it is and what Toy Story was overall, to many sticking by us and even cared throughout as we moved on and grew up in life. That sometimes sometimes we should still retain that childlike wonder in our lives to preserve the beauty of what living is all about. And if we can do that, then maybe life would actually become more sweeter, just like our time with Woody and Buzz that endured far more than any of us actually expected, and one we will be ever grateful for infinity and beyond. And with that said, I'm all done, so goodbye.